So first things first, we need a way to store all our tasks. So as I said, to store things, you need a variable. We need a variable that can store all the tasks the user has. So we can't use we can't use a string or an integer. We need something that can store more than one data type. So we need a list. So to do that, I'm going to create a variable called to dos and set that to an empty list. So if you want a list with nothing in it by default you don't want to add anything to the user's list. If you want a list with nothing in it by default, you just create the open square bracket and close it immediately. So that way we have nothing in the list. So I can print that and you can see we have an empty list here. So first thing we need to do is ask the user to enter into a new to do. So we say enter a new to item. Remember to format it properly so there's a gap before the user start typing. So once we do this, we have a place to enter a new to do. So yeah, I could just write and pull and close because we didn't ask it to do anything. So remember to use the data entered here, we need to set it to a variable as well. So we can say I equal input. So now whatever the user entered is saved in this item. So if we want to program, we are still going to get the same thing because we didn't do anything with item. So here we can print item. We can also add some things after the item. So we can say has been added to this, say to your to this. So when we print this, you see um so you can see there is no space between hello and us. So you have to manually add your space here to format that properly. So when we say hello, we have hello has been added to your to-dos because of the space we added here. So, but if we do this, we also need to actually, instead of just telling the user the item has been added, we need to actually add them to the to-do list. So instead of just printing, we need a way to add something else, the item to the list. To do that, every list has a function, has a method. So the concept of method means you know how numbers have like how you have two five plus five and it gives you and it gives you how you have five plus five and it gives you a number. Things like for other variable for other data types, we have other operations that can be performed on them. Most of them can be gotten by typing the data type and then adding a dot. And after that dot, you have a list of methods you can perform on that data type. So for a list now, we have the append, declare, copy, different kind of. So basically, let me run through this. Append is to add something to a list. So in our case, when we want to add the to do item to a list, we use the append method. Declare is to clear a list. So for instance, the user wants to delete every single item in their to-do list. We use the clear method. A copy is basically to duplicate a list, just as you do in text editors like Microsoft Word. So it creates a duplicate of that list. The count is just as its name says, to count the number of items in a list. The extend is to join two lists together. The index. So basically, let me just the ones you'll be using a lot are number one, the append. The other one is to pop. Pop removes the last item in the list. Sort item, they say you want to sort stuff alphabetical order or in some other orders. Reverse does what it says. Reverse a list item, say from the top to bottom or bottom to top. So these ones that start with I underscore, you should ignore them for now. These are more advanced methods. So in our case, we want to add this item to do. So we use append. You can also over things to see what they do. So append object to the end of a list. So let's say this list has these four items. Once you use append, let's say you add five here. The append adds five to the end of this list. So it becomes this. So that's why they said it appends objects. So anything variables are called objects. There's a lot of things called objects. You understand that as the course progresses. So append adds an item to the end of a list. So the other time I said we also have insert. So insert instead of let's say you want to add five before three, then you need to specify the index at which you want to add it, which is one, two, and then you add it right here. So for this one, instead of just passing a single value within this open and close brackets, you need to pass two. The first thing is the index at which you want to insert. And in this case, you want to insert it after two, which is you can just count it this way: one, two. I'll explain a better way to do it now. But then after the in passing the index, you specify what you want to add to it. So let's say I want to add 10. So you want this to become 1, 2, 10, 3, 4. So to verify it's working as we intended, we have to print it to see. So now when I print, I'll pass it to add it to the item. So let's just say hello. So because this line is still present in the code, we still need to add it to the item. So now you can see 1, 2, 3, 10, 3, 4, which is why I just explained. So the reason why logically this 10 is a number 3, so we're supposed to enter 3 here. But the reason we are not doing that is because in programming, things usually start counting from 0. So this 1 is at index 0, not 1. That's why we have 0, 1, and then 2. So let me use this as an example. So this is 0, 1, 2. That's why we are using index 2. Okay, so we also have the remove method. So what this does is it removes a value from the list. So let's say we want to remove 4 from the list. Okay, I think this will be confusing because I named them. So so you can see me using space, and this is just for readability. You can either use space or not in your list. The same thing also goes for variables. You can choose to put spaces here. For readability, it's better to have spaces there. So here, without using the index, if I want to remove this 7, that is what this remove method is for. So I can just write remove 7, and it goes into the list and remove 7 anyway. It is 7. So it's not using index for remove. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 9. So if you have multiple 7, it removes only before 7. So as you can see, the last 7 is remaining. So back to what we are trying to create. As we progress through the course, where I'm going to keep explaining other methods. So what we actually need is to append item. I think to complete this back. Let me just So now let me remove the items presently in the list. So now when I try to add, as you can see, the to-do now contains Apple. But the program closes immediately. In our to-do app, we don't want the program to close immediately. We want it to keep running till the user chooses to stop adding items to the to-do list. So to do that, we need something called a loop. So a loop is basically something that tells the program to keep running forever. So to do that, so okay, let me just create a simple loop. For example, let me remove, don't let me remove that part. So for example, if you want the program to keep running this every single time, you start this with a while, with a loop called while. So this is how you create a while, basically. And as you can see, every other thing here has an underline showing that every other thing here is invalid. The reason is in Python, when you want to specify, the reason is for a while loop, as you can see, during the input, in the input statement, we have a parentheses to mark the beginning and the end. And for string, we have the double quotes to mark the beginning and the end. For loops, to mark the beginning and the end, you need it's basically a loop needs to have something in it. So at this point, we are not having anything in, even though everything here is under the while loop, they are not in the while loop. So we need to specify where the while loop starts and where it ends. So to do that, instead of having a parenthesis or a curly brace, we need to use something called indentation. So indentation is basically using four spaces or a tab. So you can use the tab key on your keyboard or add four spaces, but by convention and what most programmers use, you just tap once. So as you can see, it's equivalent to four spaces. You count one, two, three, four. So you have to do the same for every single line. So now everything is under the while loop. So any other thing you add here will not run when the while loop is running. So these items, these lines are within the while loop. So this means everything here will run multiple times. So the program goes from the top. Once it gets to this point to do list, it starts over. So this place never gets to the line. Let me show you what I'm trying to say. So once I click play here, let's go up. So let's say add up. As you can see, it goes back to the beginning. We just enter a new to do item. So and that is here. So it starts from the top over again. It does not reach here. That's because this item is outside the loop. So if I add, let's say, range, as you can see, the loop is containing only orange, and I've added apple in the same terminal space. The reason for this is because the to do we are setting to do to empty list every single time. So it comes, let's say the program is running for the first time. It sets to do to an empty list. It asks the user to enter a new item, which it does here, and then it adds the new item, which is apple, the one I entered here, into to do and print to do's. So it prints the apple with the first in the first run. So I said it's going to start over from where the while loop started. So the while loop started here. So it's going to reset to do to an empty list again. So the previous app will be hard has been discarded because the to-do list has been modified to an empty list. So to prevent that, remember anything outside this while loop only runs once. So we can't put it at the bottom like this because code starts running from here, and when it gets to this to do, it looks up for to do and can't find to do. So the to do has to be at the top. If you're wondering how I'm moving this line upward, you hold the Alt key and the direction you want it to go. So that's up arrow and down arrow. So I'm moving to the top. And remember, we can't have indentation here because this is not within a while loop. So now that we have the to do top, once we run our program again, so we need to stop this one from running. To stop this one from running, you can just type Control and Z, then enter. As you can see, it closed the program. It is going to show you this error, but you don't need to worry about that. So now when I play, it asks me to enter to do item Apple Orange. As you can see, we have two items now. So I can also add one more. Let's say banana. So now we have three items in the to-do list. So same thing to cancel it, just Control Z. So now you can see it never gets here. So that's because we never stop the while loop from running. Or rather line 5 after it gets to line 7. So basically the code is trapped within this within these four lines. So of course that's not what we want. We want a way to terminate the loop. So what we can do is that if you notice this line 4, we have while true. So as I said from the beginning of the tutorials, when I was explaining a boolean, I said boolean can only be two values. So we have the true or false value. So this while true statement means while basically just means run forever. That's what this while true means. So if we don't manually end the program here, there is no way to end the program. So and mostly you don't want that. You don't want a loop to run forever. You want you want to provide the user a way to stop the program from running. So to do that, we need to instead of adding true here, we need to create a new variable called running so that we can't change the true here while the program is running, but we can change the value of a variable while the program is running. So we can set running to true because we want the program to be running at the beginning. Instead of saying while true, we can say while running. So basically, this is the same thing as we had before. Since running is true, while running means while true. When we run this, get the same um we get the same logic we had before, but that still doesn't give us a way to end the program. So as if you are Control Z to end. So what we can do is we need to set this running to queue. To do that, we can do that anytime the user enters, let's say queue. So to end the program, so we can also add an help message here. We can say quit. So now when we run the program, we get queue to print, but when we enter queue, nothing happens because we haven't done the logic. It just adds the queue to the inputs. So we need a way to check what the user entered. If it's queue, we add it to if it's queue, we exit the program, else we add whatever the user entered to the to-do list. So we don't want to add queue to the to-do list. So to do that, we need something called a conditional statement. So a conditional statement is basically a statement that only runs when a particular statement is true. It's a block of code that runs when a particular statement is true. So it's just like we have the while while loop here. While loop is also like a conditional statement. So it's running while running is set to true. It keeps looping. So, but in this case, we need something called an if statement. So an if statement is used to check if a condition is true, then we take a action only once. Remember, while loop keeps running for life until you stop it from running manually. But the if statement only runs once, so we could also use while loop here, but that would be a waste. So we should say if item, and to check, so yeah, we want to check if item. So basically, this is the syntax here. We have the statement that we want to check. So if that statement, the same way we have while running, so we need a statement here that will represent a true or false. So then whatever we want to happen, we do that here. So basically, the statement we want to check if item, which is whatever the user entered, is equal to queue. So we say if item, just like English, but for to check if something is equal to another thing, you add two equal tos. As you can see here, we have one equal to. This is an assignment operator. So we are setting running equals true. We can't use the same here. So we are not trying to set item to anything. We're trying to check if item is equal to something. So we are using two equation signs. So what we want to check is, remember, we want to check if it's equal to q, and q is a string. So we add the double quote and add q in it. So if item equals q, so remember what is keeping this running is because we have this running variable set to true. To stop that, we can just set running to be false. So now we only set running to false if the user enters q. So now when I run the program, let's say first I add an apple and then tap q. As you can see, now we can get to the end of the program because this ended successfully. We didn't end it with Control Z. That's why we can see this loop ended. So the program ran to the end. So that's why we have this loop ended here. And you can see another error here. The queue was actually added to the to do. It's not supposed to be added. It's supposed to just quit the program. That is because even though we set the running to false here, the program still finished this once before quitting the application. So we need to only do this if this statement is not true. So to do that, the if statement has some. So we, for instance, we could do if item for not equal to. Remember, I said we want to only do this when item is not equal to this. So instead of adding two equal to's, the first one will be an exclamation mark. So this stands for not, and this stands for equal. So not equal to you. And remember, this has to be indented. So a tab. So now these two statements only runs when this is true, and this one only runs when this is true. So now when we run the program again, we have another apple, orange. So now we want to quit the application, we can just type Q, and now we have the loop ended. As you can see, this didn't run, so we didn't append and we didn't print. So one other thing we can do instead of writing this long statement is every if statement has an else statement. So we know if item is not equal to q. So if we come here and add an else statement here, so that automatically means if this statement is not true. So here we have if item equal to q. Just adding an else without, you don't need to add any statement for the else statement. You don't need to add any condition for the else statement. So basically once you type else, it means if this It's not true. Just like basic English, if item is this, else do this. So once you run the code, we should still get the same results. So Q ended the program. So let's change this to program. So now we have a basic to-do application that can add items to a to-do list and end the application. So, but our code has another logic, another error. So once you run this and we come here and we type a capital Q. So remember I told you Python is case sensitive. So this Q is different from the small Q we did here. So doing this, it adds the Q to the list in the program. So what we want is to allow the user to enter any case of Q to close the program. So now I need to use small Q to end the program. So what you can do instead is you need to convert this to lowercase. So if the user enters an uppercase Q, you convert it to a lowercase, then compare it with a lowercase Q. Or you can convert it to an uppercase. So if the user enters um, Q in lowercase, you convert it to an uppercase, then you have to compare it with uppercase Q. I don't know if you understand. So regardless of the case of the Q the user entered here, we are always comparing the uppercase with the uppercase. So that way we can capture both the lowercase and the uppercase. So let's stick with the lowercase. So to convert to a lowercase, as I said, you know, when we wanted to add an element to when we wanted to modify the to do to do list, we use the append method. The string, which is this input item, whatever the user entered, the apple also has a method to create a lowercase version of whatever its value is. So once you're trying to type, we have all these methods. So we have the capitalize. We have a lot of methods here, but what we want is lower, which is this one. And remember, methods, whenever you use dot to access something, so as you can see, when you over it's called the method. It always has the brackets, the open and close brackets. So, but this doesn't take anything because you just want it to create a lowercase. You don't need to pass anything, unlike the append where you need to pass what you want to add. So now when I run the program, I had an app that I contact you, it ends the program. So now that works. So now let's make this a little bit more functional. So a few things I want us to change is let's give the user some more commands to play with. So for instance, we want them to be able to see every item currently in their to-do list and not print it every single time we add an element to our to-do list. So we can just have like something saying this has been added to-do list. Let's say Apple has been added to-do list. And then we have another command they can use to view all the items on their to-do list and maybe clear all the items in their to-do list. So to do that, firstly, at the beginning, we need to tell them the list of commands they have. So remember, we don't want to tell them the list of commands every single time they add it to the list because our while loop runs every single time they want them to add it to the list. So we only want this to run once. So we are going to put that at the top of the to do of the while loop. So yeah, let's say we have how many commands? Um, say select one of the following commands. So one is to show to use. We have two Let's say delete all to use. And we have Q quit program. Now when we run this, we should get this command at the top. So to make this make more sense, we should have each number on different line. To do that, you can't just do this. You can't just press enter to move it to a different line. You can see it's giving me an error. So what you should do instead is use a special character. So to do that, you type in, you press the forward slash key and then N. So this means a new line character, which is the same thing as typing enter. So when we run this, sorry, we need to close this. So when we run this, you guys can see this starts on a new line. So we should do the same thing for the rest. So let's close this and run the program. So now this is formatted properly. So we have select one of the following commands. We want to show all to dos, delete all to dos, and Q to quit the program. So now we don't have these functionalities, we don't have these logics created. To create them, remember, we need to always check what the user entered. So since we already checked what we already checked if the user entered a queue, what we can also do is check if the user entered one or two. So to do that, we can either create a different if statement, but that separates, that breaks the, so to do that, we need to add a statement here. So firstly, we are checking if item.lower is equal to q. Before we run to check if it's not, we need to check other conditions. So to do that, we use something called elif. It's a short for else if. So you remember in the else statement, we can't have a condition here. It's not possible to have a condition. Let me disable my. So we can't have a condition here, but we need something that allows us to have condition. So we can check if item dot lower is one. We don't need to check lower in this case because one is always one. There's no lowercase one. So an else if gives us that functionality to check for a different condition. So you can do item equal to one. So yeah, what do you want to do when the item equals to one? So we show all to do. So basically we just need to print to do's. It's just as simple as that. So you can have multiple else if. You can only have one else and one if, but you can have multiple else if. I might pronounce else if, but just now I mean elif. So item equal to two. Remember to clear a to do item, sorry, to clear a list item, we have the function clear, which just sets the to do list to an empty list. Also, you can also do, instead of using clear, you can also do reduce to. These two basically do the same thing. So we just need to use this one because it's cleaner. So we don't just want to um, do what the user asks. We have to tell the user we did this. So for the first one, you can say these are your to do items. And for this one, you can say to do list are declared. So I should move this down. So yes, well, instead of printing the to do, anytime we add a new item, we want to say print. So whatever the user asks to add, then remember this is always a string. So we add it to, and remember to add this space before that has been added to. So now when we run this program, sorry, we need to quit the previous one. Let me make this bigger so we can see. If you're having too much things there and just want to clear up this place to make everything up fresh, you can close this here, you can kill the terminal and reopen it, or you can just type CLS. This clears the terminal. Now you can start afresh. Now when I click the play, I have this select, I have the help money at the top and the input to add my new to do. So I can start with the first command, enter, let me show all to dos. To do is currently empty, so I can add items to my to do. So you see Apple has been added to my to dos, range, banana. So now I've added three items. So when I click one again, when I select one again, I can see I have my three items there. So now I need to test the second one, which is delete all to dos. So when I enter to, it says my to do list has been cleared. To confirm that, let's use one again. And I can see my to do was actually cleared. So now I can use Q to quit the program. Now we are sure everything works. So now our to do list is working fine. So we might also want to show the length of items added to our to do list. So I think we should do that. I think we should do that here. So let's say we want to have, um, let's say before this, we want to tell the user, let's say you currently have. So we have to insert, we have to look for a way to insert the number right here, the number of items in the to do. So after the number, then we say items. Let me add a dummy number so we can items in your list. So add a full stop and remember, let's just add a plus here. So we're adding this to this. So we're adding two strings together. So now, regardless of the number of items in our to-do list, we're always going to be showing the user they have 10 items, which doesn't make sense. So to get the number of items in the user's to-do list, let's get a variable for that. Let's say length of to-dos. So to get the number of items, Python has a function called, just like this print statement and the input statement, we have another one called len. This returns the length of any of, for instance, a list. It can also give you the length of a string. So if you run it with a string, it's going to tell you how many characters are in the string. But for a list, it's going to tell us how many elements are in the list. So we say to dos. So now we need to find a way to insert length of to dos into the string right here. So if we just paste length of to dos here, you can see there is no difference between this and this. So it does not know it's supposed to treat this as a variable. To achieve this, we need to use something called a list. Let me just point it so you can see what I'm saying. So let's say one. So you can see you currently have length of to-dos items in your list. So you just treat the length of to-dos as a string because it's within a double quote. So we need a way to separate this. Of course, we can add a double quotes here, add a plus here, add a double quotes here, add a plus here, and remember to add spaces. So this makes sense and it's going to work, but you can see it's giving us a very, very long code and it's harder to read. So when I do one, and it even gives us error because this length of to do is a number. So you can't add a number to a string. So we are going to get to how to do if we really have to, how to manipulate that. But for now, this is not the right way to do this. So let me take this back to how it was before. So in Python, it's called formatted string, more spaces. So as you can see, this is a normal string. Starts from here and ends here. If you want to insert a variable in a string, you use something called the formatted string. So at the beginning of the first double quote, you type F. So this turns this string into a formatted string. So notice the F is in smaller case, uppercase F won't work. So basically, within this place, anything that starts with a curly brace and end with a curly brace will be treated as a variable. So you can see this changes color and it's telling you it's a variable. So if you want to make this your a variable, let's say you have a variable called your at the top, you have to start with a curly brace and end with a curly brace. Now it's looking for your at the top. So you can see your is not defined because we don't have any variable named your. So we can remove that. And now we have successfully injected the length of to-dos into our string here. So now I can select one. You can see you currently have 0 items in your list. So now when I type apple, add orange, now I type one, you can see you currently have 2 items in your list. So now that works. And I think the to-do list is, and I think our to-do list is good enough at this point.